And so we're trying this experiment right now with a form of money called fiat currency, which exists by government fiat or government decree and is worth whatever they tell us it's worth. And that is failing on a monumental scale right now. So we're heading into the really chaotic part of the process when everything breaks down, and then we have to start looking at some kind of a monetary reset where we go back and figure out how we want the monetary system to work now that it's broken, and decide whether to go back to the old style of commodity-based currencies or do something new. So it's going to be a very fun debate, but it's going to be preceded by a horrendous stretch when, if you thought 2022 was bad from an inflation standpoint, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to be much, much worse and much, much more chaotic and much more destructive for regular people. That's the decade we have in front of us.
In this video interview, macro and monetary analyst John Rubino provides insight into inflation, the implications of printing money, and the current US debt crisis. He also makes chilling predictions for the next few decades. John believes an inevitable crash is coming, and to quote him, "We're in for a horrendous stretch." His chilling analysis is based on mounting national debt and the realization that all attempts to curb the growth of this debt have failed and will very likely continue to fail.
Not good.
Worse is that John explains that it isn't a US-only problem. He believes the US is in fact currently in the best shape among the global superpowers. He explains that contrary to the popular opinion that the US is headed towards an economic crisis, he believes the entire global economy is on its way to total collapse. Let's listen as he provides his analysis.
When we went off the last vestiges of the gold standard in 1971, we basically handed all the world's governments, especially the US, but everybody else too, unlimited credit cards. In effect, they could basically, via a monetary printing press, create as much new currency as they wanted to and use it for whatever they wanted. So naturally, the governments of the world got bigger and bigger and bigger because there was no restraint on their growth. And, now we've got insane amounts of debts pretty much everywhere in every sector of every major society, which is the inevitable result of allowing governments to create as much new currency and encourage the creation of as much new debt as they want. And so we're where you would expect us to be, given what rational people know about human nature. And it's a really bad place because we've been taking on so much new debt that basically what we found out in the last couple of years is that this is all the higher interest rates can go, because when you've got huge amounts of debt, rising interest rates increase your interest expense. And so if you look at a chart of government, for instance, the US government's interest costs totally spiked from like $200 billion a year to over $1 trillion now. So those are debilitating numbers. In other words, you can't have your interest costs soaring like that without going broke. And so we basically figured that out. And that's why the Fed has stopped raising interest rates and is going to start cutting them pretty soon. Not because inflation is below their target rate, which it's not yet, but because higher interest rates are going to bankrupt everybody. All the major governments, most individuals now who have credit card debt or adjustable rate mortgages or adjustable rate business loans, anything like that, their interest costs are soaring, and it's going to become debilitatingly expensive unless they get interest rates back down. And this is a huge deal because it means we can never again raise interest rates. And when the markets figure that out, people are going to act accordingly, and they're going to panic buy anything that can't be inflated away.
So far, John has set the background of the problem and provided historical context. He's explained that the current state of the global economy is due to a transition from the gold standard in 1971. He believes that this singular act is responsible for why we are where we are. In the following section, he touches more on the implications of this transition and provides insight into when this global collapse is likely to occur. Most terrifying is that John doesn't believe we can be rescued, but that a collapse is a certainty. Let's head back in.
The 200 years we had something called the classical gold standard, which basically ended in 1914 or 1971, depending on how you date it. The general price trend was down. In other words, we had kind of steady deflation for centuries, not decades, but centuries, because we were a healthy economy that was getting more and more productive with a constrained money supply, and that the prices of things went down. The cost of living went down for people. And it was a really healthy time financially and economically. We're the opposite of that now, and we're going to pay a horrendous price for screwing up like this. And so we're trying this experiment right now with a form of money called fiat currency, which exists by government fiat or government decree and is worth whatever they tell us it's worth. And that is failing on a monumental scale right now. So we're heading into the really chaotic part of the process when everything breaks down, and then we have to start looking at some kind of a monetary reset where we go back and figure out how we want the monetary system to work now that it's broken, and decide whether to go back to the old style of commodity-based currencies or do something new. So it's going to be a very fun debate, but it's going to be preceded by a horrendous stretch when, if you thought 2022 was bad from an inflation standpoint, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to be much, much worse and much, much more chaotic and much more destructive for regular people. So that's the decade we have in front of us. There's really no way out of something like this. Basically what happens, in human history, countries have tried this a bunch of times where they screw up their own currency. They borrow too much, they debase their currency, they have a currency crisis, they collapse, and then they start over with sound money. But what's different today is that the whole world is doing it. It used to be like one country would do it in the context of a sound money world. Everybody else was on the gold standard. And this one country tried a new experiment with fiat currency, and it blew up on them. And they either got invaded because they were so weak, or they had to hunker down for a long time to kind of rebuild the semblance of a working state. But this time, every major government is doing the same thing. So there is no broader sound money world in which this is going to happen. It's going to happen all at once or on a rolling basis across the world. And, that makes it new. So it's hard to predict. You can predict, that everything will happen to everyone as it did to individual countries in the past, but that's not guaranteed. Could be much worse because it's happening everywhere and there's nobody to rely on to bail out anybody else.
A global collapse is coming. That's the message today from renowned author and macro monetary analyst John Rubino. John has taken us on an insightful journey through the history of money and explained exactly why we are where we are. More importantly, John Jazz explained what he believes will result from this, and it's total chaos. John has explained that the only way out of this mess is through it, and that perhaps one day we will rebuild from the ashes. But first and foremost, a global collapse is certain to occur. It's more frightening to imagine, as John strongly believes it will occur as soon as 2031. There are truly frightening times ahead of us. What do you think about John Rubino's prediction of total chaos? To see the latest in crypto news, watch this video here.